Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, Mike has gone real deep on 007 in video games. That's James Bond's code number?
Is it his code number?
Code number? Is that what it is?
I think so. It wouldn't be a code. Well, maybe it's his code name. It's still a name.
Yeah, but there's other 00 agents, right? Like that's a ranking of agent. There's like MI5, MI6, 00 agent.
001? Who was 001?
Who knows?
Oh, man, it's so exciting. But yeah, that's what we're doing today. We're going through James Bond video games. So
Sweet.
Everyone get a martini. Does everyone have a martini?
Yes, I have shaken it and not stirred it.
Excellent work. I'm going to go to an Aston Martin dealership, and I'm going to sit in an Aston Martin while I record this so everyone will know. And the dealership will get it. They'll understand. They'll be totally fine with it.
Yeah, they're usually cool with that.
They're totally fine with it. The first game that came out for James Bond was in 1982. So it's kind of late because the movies were started in like the 60s, right?
Yeah.
60s or 70s-ish. And it was titled Shaken But Not Stirred. It was actually a text-based adventure developed by Richard Shepard Software. It was released in the United Kingdom for the ZX Spectrum. I don't know what that is. Is that a computer?
It is. It was very popular in the UK, and they call it the ZX Spectrum.
Okay, I like ZX Spectrum way more. That sounds more like a spy computer. In the game, you actually try to stop Dr. Death from holding the world ransom with a nuclear warhead, and boy, oh boy, did this game not age well. I read the synopsis of the enemies you fight, and there are a lot of little people, but they're not called little people, and they're named like Tac Tac and things like that. It did not age very well. I'll just say that much.
Also, Dr. Death as a villain? What kind of name is Dr. Death?
I mean, it's alliterative. You think Stan Lee would write it, right? Totally.
Yeah, I guess. I feel like
it's a very Stan Lee name.
You should. I mean, maybe he didn't want people to think that he was anything but a villain. You know, there's some villains that really want to go ham on that.
Originally, his actual real name is Dr. Daisy, so it gets really confusing at the villain conferences they go to.
Yeah.
So, with that said, Computer and Video Games, a UK magazine titled Computer and Video Games, very original name. I like it a lot. Tells you exactly what it is. Said, quote, "At last, a realistic 007 adventure." The mode of play is quite different from most adventure games, successfully recreating the world of James Bond on a computer. So it was definitely like a thing. You know, it started out text-based. I think a lot of games were text-based. I never played text-based games. Did you?
No, not really. No.
That's kind of the generation before us, I think.
I think so, yeah.
So the first non-text-based 007 game came out in 1983. So only a year later, and it came out on Atari 2600, 5200, Atari 8-bit, ColecoVision, Commodore 64, Sega SG, and was creatively titled James Bond 007.
You know exactly what you're in for with James Bond 007.
You know exactly what it is. And this game has 4 levels in it, and each one represented a different movie, which is kind of cool.
Oh, nice.
I thought that was really neat. Yeah, so the levels are Diamonds Are Forever, where 007 rescues Tiffany Case from an oil rig. That's the part you play. The Spy Who Loved Me, where you destroy an underwater laboratory. I like to say laboratory. Dexter, you know. And then we had Moonraker, and that is where you destroy a satellite. That was all in space. It's a really cool movie. And then lastly, we had 1981, the For Your Eyes Only. And in that one, you actually got to go to like a sunken boat and get some radio equipment. So it's like kind of these cool little missions you got to do as James Bond. All of this was done 2D side-scrolling, but the best part of this whole game, I think, is your vehicle is a plane, a car, and a submarine all in one, just like the real 007. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the fact that it's like easier to program on a computer. That doesn't. I mean, I'm sure that's totally fine. You know, not a problem. But it's definitely all those in one, just like in the movies. And I think what's most interesting about this game in particular, it was published by Parker Brothers.
Oh, Parker Brothers of Monopoly fame? Is that Monopoly?
Yeah, they did. I think they did. The board game company. And this was back when they were just getting into the video game industry, which we actually talked about at this time in our video game history timeline from a long time ago. Didn't it feel like ages ago?
Yeah, because this was when video games were still pretty new, and so it seemed like a natural extension for these toy companies. Like, oh, kids love playing video games. We make products for kids. We're going to make video games. And it didn't always work out.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. This is really interesting to see this kind of change and go through. And my favorite fact from this whole thing actually comes up with the next Bond video game. So if you were a James Bond fan and you were alive in 1985, I have some great news. You actually got 2 James Bond games in 1985. The bad news is both of them have the exact same name, which is not confusing at all. So the first was called A View to Kill, which was an action game published by Domark. And if you don't know, Domark later turns into a very tiny studio called Square Enix.
Oh, a small indie game studio.
Yeah, a tiny studio. No, like barely. They made like some Last Fantasy game. It's a very small one. We don't know what that is. But the second game was a text-based adventure based on, like, called James Bond 007 A View to Kill. So you'll notice this pattern where the text-based games always have James Bond 007 in front of them and A View to Kill. But then, to make it even more confusing, in about the middle of this, they bring back James Bond 007, but not for text-based games. Because you can see, text-based games kind of go on the way out in the end of the 80s. So, you just throw James Bond 007 in front of anything, and it becomes way more clear and concise, I think, right? So that's totally fine. The text-based one was made by Mindscape Productions, and what's important to note about both of these games is they were the first time they came out with the movie.
Oh, so these were the movie tie-ins.
Yeah, they were the movie tie-ins for A View to Kill. Commodore User, which is a magazine, because it tells you exactly what it is back then. Magazine, so concise. Called the Domark action version of A View to Kill, quote, certainly one of the better game of the film implementations around. So that's good to know that when they started, video game film adaptations were actually good, contrary to today.
That's great.
They're not.
Yeah.
Unless you're Spider-Man 2. That's
I
the
think
one.
the line is, did the game come out at the same time as the movie, and is it designed to be a game of the movie? If so, game's going to be awful. If it's just a game that is based on the same property that a movie is based on, you might be okay. Like all the Batman Arkham games are great, Spider-Man's great, but the Spider-Man movie games, except for Spider-Man 2, not great.
That's right. And the Spider-Man 2 one was good because wasn't it like an open free roam world for the first time?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was the exception that proves the rule, I think. But most games that came out, like in GoldenEye, which we'll get to, but it came out a couple years after the movie did, which means that it's probably safe. It was probably a pretty good game.
Nice. Well, the text-based game version of James Bond 007 A View to Kill, okay, not to be confused at all, was really well received by critics, but the first level was described as skull-crushing in the review I read, which I'm like, well, that's not very good. The text-based version, though, was so well received that a year later, in 1986, we got a James Bond 007 Goldfinger game.
Ooh.
Which is a text-based game based on the movie Goldfinger, once again published by Mindscape Productions. The fun part is there is nothing really I could find on the game except for the cover blurb on the back of the box, because so many of these games are so obscure. There's just nothing on them. And I even went to the James Bond wiki, because those had the more coverage than Wikipedia did and stuff. But I will read the rear blurb, and here it is. Quote, "The hotter the danger, the cooler you take it. In this action-packed thriller, based on the film that made Bond a legend, this interactive fiction adventure is a chance for you to face the challenge that made movie history. Goldfinger wants you dead, and Oddjob is waiting, only too willing to tip his steel-rimmed hat in your honor."
Wow.
End quote. Do you think I have a job as like a movie preview guy? I just really want to be.
I think so. That game has the best Bond movie with the best Bond theme song with clearly the best back of the box blurb for a James Bond game.
And
the best reader of that blurb.
Oh, you know what? Just stop it. You're just making me blush over here. I can't handle it. Is it that or all the martinis I've drank this episode? I can't tell.
Oh man.
So that's a thing, that rear blurb. Okay. So now we're getting back into the action-y versions of the game. This is 1987 now, and this is what's cool. Domark starts making these games like a lot. They're the guys that make the action games for James Bond, which is cool because, as we know, Square Enix goes to Final Fantasy. I just thought it was a really weird connection, But then again, the gaming world's pretty small at this point in time, so makes a lot of sense. So they make The Living Daylights in 1987. Then I couldn't find anything about that, by the way, just so everyone knows. I couldn't find anything about The Living Daylights. There were
what
no
system
pages.
was it for? Just a game called that?
I think it's still the same, like the Atari, the Commodore, Coleco, like those kind of systems. I couldn't find anything on it. It was so weird.
Very strange.
If you go to 1988, they make a game for Live and Let Die. And this one came out for the Amiga, Atari ST, Amstrad CPC, which I've never heard of, Commodore 64, MS-DOS, and the ZX Spectrum. Oh, look at me with the lingo in 1988. But what's
that one has
fun
a good
about this
theme song
one-
too.
What was that? Sorry?
The Live and Let Die is a good theme song too. It's Paul McCartney, I think.
Live and let die. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to get sued now. I just did that. Paul McCartney's coming for us. I'm sorry, everybody. This podcast is going to be over soon. We're going to get killed. We're going to get attacked by a beetle. That's going to be crazy. So what's fun about this version, though, the Live and Let Die game, it was a racing game.
Whoa.
So it didn't start as a Bond game. This is really cool. This is like, because you know how we've heard this happen with like Super Mario 2, big game that was changed, you know. Domark decided to rebrand it after they saw the competitor Elite Systems International. They were making a game called Aqua Blast, which was like a racing boat game. And then Domark wanted to make a competition game to that, and then they realized that they could make an entire game off of the one speedboat chase in Live and Let Die, and that's exactly what they did.
That sounds awesome, and I would totally play that game.
Yeah, right? It's so cool. I was like, oh, we make a scene, we're going to make a game about it. And back then, I mean, it's on Atari, so it's like games are what? Like an hour to beat max, maybe?
Yeah,
you know?
maybe. If you're good.
So that if you're good, you got to get good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People be like trying to be like, I have the highest KD on Live and Let Die. I'm like, get out of here, get good, scrub. Okay. So then, in 1989, we got a game called 007, License to Kill. This time, though, the game was a top-down scrolling action game. This was also made by Domark, okay? It's kind of like Raiden, you know, the airplane arcade game. And I think it's 1943 is the World War II version, okay? So there were 6 levels where you chased an evil drug czar named Sanchez, who murdered Bond's best friend Felix Leiter's bride. A lot of steps to get there. His best friend Felix, his bride was dead, and then he went off through this drug lord. So, you know, but Bond's the guy. He believes in honor, you know, and revenge. So this game was actually praised by critics because it's super duper action packed. It actually looks really cool. I watched YouTube footage of this game. It was developed on DOS, and it later came out for the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, BBC Micro. Is it the British Broadcasting Company? Did they make their own game system and we didn't know about it?
I'm gonna Google that right now.
Yeah, Google that for me. Commodore 64, MSX, and the ZX Spectrum. If you lived in South Korea, by the way, and you were willing to wait 7 years, you got this game for your Sega Master System in 1996.
Wow, that took a while. The BBC Micro was made by the British Broadcasting Corporation. There you go.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, it was
Look at you.
manufactured by Acorn Computers, but it was developed by the BBC.
You know what? BBC is really awesome. They were like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do Downton Abbey. That's what they said. That's
Those
how
are
they
the
did
two
it.
projects they wanted to work on. They did the BBC Micro in the 1980s, and they were like, we are good for about 30 years.
And then
they
here
moved on
comes
to Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey. So now we're in the 90s. Do you like the 90s? Do you feel that, Tyler?
Oh, yeah. I like
You
the
like
90s. Big fan.
So 1990 saw the release of 2 James Bond games, The Spy Who Loved Me and Operation Stealth. Now, The Spy Who Loved Me was another top-down action game from Domark. They really did some serious work at it this time. You know, it was the same thing. And the game was released on Amiga, Atari ST, Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, MS-DOS, ZX Spectrum, to good but not great reviews. I think this is when Domark games started to get a little stale with the James Bond genre. They were just cranking them out, kind of like the Call of Duty of James Bond at the time. You know what I mean?
Rested on their laurels.
Yeah,
They had
exactly.
some really good, awesome games, and now they're just like cashing in on that.
And the games are still good. They're just doing the exact same thing they did before. So it's like, all right. But that's where Operation Stealth was a breath of martini-fogged fresh air. Okay? Operation Stealth, also known as James Bond 007 The Stealth Affair, in the US, is a point-and-click adventure game released for the Amiga, Atari ST, and MS-DOS. And what's interesting about this is Bond takes orders from the CIA. Isn't that weird?
Whoa. So he's the British Secret Service taking orders from the Americans?
Yeah, and that's because he was only James Bond in the US version of the game. Everywhere else in the world, he's John Glames.
John Glames. Wow.
Glames. John Glames. It doesn't have the same ring to it. Also, the cover of the box, Glames or Bond, is blonde. So
James Blonde?
James Blonde. He's more like James Blonde. I think it's important, though, that this was its own separate story for the first time. It was not based on a movie, and it had all sorts of cool James Bond stuff, like a submarine rescue, and at one point you go to an artificial volcano island base, like very, very Bondish.
Yeah,
So,
that sounds pretty Bondy.
yeah, and also I want to mention real quick that I think we should adopt John Glames as the Jaybird of characters.
Oh,
Is that
wow.
okay
You
with
think
you?
he's on that level, huh?
I think he's on that level. I
Okay.
think no one really. I want to. I mean, if we were a bigger podcast, I would make John Glames T-shirts to sell,
Wow.
or just for us to wear, just the two of us, and only we get the joke, and it's magical. But it's just really great to me that they made this like whole new character, and then in America they're like, no one's gonna care about John Glames. Just put Bond on it and call it good. So you're probably like, hey, Mike, these games are getting kind of stale. You know, John Glames is cool, obviously, but we're just getting all these top-down, boring, I don't know how to say it, just like Domark James Bond games.
Yeah.
How about
and
we
I think John
spice it up?
Glames is old. Like, he's playing
Yeah,
old man.
Oh, yeah, John Glames is easily in his like late 50s, you know.
Wow.
Just look at it. But he has a beautiful, luxurious mane of blonde hair. So
Uh-huh.
you know he's good. He's got it down. But, Tyler, let me introduce you to a little teenager by the name of James Bond Jr.
All right. Dude, I used to watch that TV show. Wasn't there a cartoon that went along with
Yeah,
that?
it is based on a cartoon. There were 2 James Bond Jr. games that came out. The first was for NES in 1991. Both were developed by THQ. James Bond Jr. had a cartoon series at the time, so you're like, oh, he's a cartoon. We have to make a platforming video game
Of course.
for him.
Yep.
And the second James Bond Jr. game was on the SNES, and the SNES version, because it could do more, because it was on a better system, stronger system, it had more platforming, exploring, it had vehicle levels. I actually watched a lot of YouTube of this, and it was actually looked really fun. Like, it kind of reminded me of those other, like, jumping platform shooting games, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find any reviews of this game, but it looked really fun, and I actually kind of want to get like an emulator and obviously a physical copy of the game, so it's not illegal.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Obviously.
When you'll be
And
dumping your own copy of it too, you'll use your Super Nintendo game reader.
Oh yeah, that I invented myself, obviously, and patented. Yeah,
Yep.
obviously. I want to play this game though. It looked really fun, and I was looking at the videos of it, and it just seemed like I saw a guy he speed runned it or long runned it, he said, and he still beat the game in 45 minutes. So, so that's cool. James Bond Jr. I couldn't figure out. I didn't know. Is James Bond Jr. James Bond's son?
I'm trying to figure that out right now. I think he's a nephew. Because there was a novel according to Wikipedia here, there was a novel in 1967 called The Adventures of James Bond Jr. 003 and a half.
003 and a half?
Yeah, and apparently he was James Bond's nephew, and then they made the television show. But it's not the same character, I guess.
I love that so much. Okay. So 1993 then saw the release of the James Bond 007 The Duel. That's another game. It was developed by a studio called The Kremlin. I'm assuming it's not the actual Kremlin in Moscow. I think it's called The Kremlin.
This is what Vladimir Putin worked on before he took up politics.
Right? And this is actually, so it was developed by the Kremlin and published by Domark for Sega Mega Drive or the Genesis. Both of them had it. Oh, also the Master System and the Game Gear, because I forgot that they supported Master System for a long time. That was why Sega was cool. They were like, we'll still make games for the Master System. This is Domark's last 007 game. So while I said before that Operation Stealth was the first game with its own original Bond story, it's important to mention that The Duel is considered by some to be the first because it wasn't based on a man named John Glames. I strongly disagree. I think we need to give John Glames the love and respect he deserves. All right? And everyone should love him and everyone should know. This game is a side-scrolling platform shooter, so they ditched the old version of the top-down Raiden style. Nothing really to note gameplay wise. If you picture in your head like a platform shooter, you probably nailed it. Good for you. John Glames, we love you so much. Okay.
Big fan.
1995, we're going to talk about a little game called GoldenEye.
Ooh, this is the one, right?
Not that GoldenEye. It's a different GoldenEye. This was actually made by Tiger Electronics. Remember Tiger Electronics?
Oh, yeah.
They made those,
in the 90s, they were making all those handheld game things. I had a Spider-Man one.
They sure did. They made a GoldenEye one. And the neat thing about this game is there were two different versions. There was like a gamepad version with an LCD display and like the up and down D-pad and the two buttons and stuff like that. But there was also a grip games version, which was a pistol grip with a trigger. And you could shoot the buttons,
Wow.
So that was a thing. So, but now that I fooled you, that I bamboozled you,
Sure got
we're
me.
going to talk about August 25th, 1997. And a little game that came out for the Nintendo 64 called GoldenEye 007. We did it. We hit it. It's 20 minutes in. We finally got here. Deserves all the air horns. Thank you, Tyler. GoldenEye 007 was directed by Martin Hollis. And Martin Hollis, just so you know, had previously worked as a second programmer on the coin-op version of Killer Instinct. That was his credit before he did GoldenEye 007. And the rest of the team was considered pretty inexperienced, actually. But this game achieved so many accolades. Like, it's just nuts. So, okay, it sold 8 million copies, making it the third best-selling N64 game behind Mario Kart and Super Mario 64.
Wow,
that's right,
incredible.
Tyler. It beat Ocarina of Time, which is crazy to me.
That is crazy talk.
Yeah, it won a BAFTA Interactive Entertainment Games Award and 4 different awards from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. And GoldenEye 007 is pretty much considered the game that showed that first-person shooters were possible on consoles. I mean, this brought the end of like Doom-like games with sprites, Doom clones, like Chex Quest, which isn't a Doom clone. It's the greatest game of all time. I think we all agree on that. A little bit strong words there. But I mean, without 007, but GoldenEye, we wouldn't have COD, Halo, Destiny, Battlefield, Borderlands. Like, you like a modern console first-person shooter, you got to thank GoldenEye.
That is a fact, for sure.
And then I would say after GoldenEye, you got to thank Halo. And then after Halo, you can go through there and do your thing. Also, we should still thank Doom, though, too, because you love Doom, I love Doom, and they were first, and we got to love them. So I just want to throw that out there. Okay. Let's get into GoldenEye 007. I have way more notes on this because this is the game that everyone wants to hear about, obviously. All right. So this game took 2.5 years to develop. Rare was pretty much riding high on their success of Donkey Kong Country in 1994. And before Hollis came in, there was an idea to have GoldenEye 007 be a 2D side-scrolling platformer for the Super Nintendo, because this was kind of right on the edge, of Super Nintendo to N64. And then Hollis was like, you know what? I propose a 3D shooting game for the Ultra 64, because that's what it was called then. No one knew it was Nintendo 64. He created a document, and he had all his design ideas he wanted in the game on this document when he pitched it to Rare. And he said, I want to have gadgets, weapons, different characters people can use, a story digression from the film, and an AI that would react to players. This is all the things he wanted, which do end up in the game. Like, story digression is, I think, what made that game so strong, but we're going to get to that later. So the main influence of the whole game, you'd be like, oh, what was it? Was it like Doom? No, it was Virtua Cop.
Oh,
remember
that's
Virtua
interesting.
Cop?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Virtua Cop had penalties for killing innocent bystanders. It had the R button, kind of aim style curve. Like, you hit the R button on the N64 controller. It had that kind of aiming in Virtua Cop. Mm-hmm. It was such an influence that the game GoldenEye 007 was almost an entirely on-the-rail shooter.
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't that be crazy? If that came out, we wouldn't be talking about it today. It was an on-the-rail shooter.
It would have been a very, very different game if that was the case.
Yeah, I'm so glad it became freeform. But Hollis and his team visited the set of the movie, and they did that to create some of the environments. And actually, if you look at some pictures of the movie to pictures of the game, they are very similar. They did a pretty good job. But thanks to a broad license from MGM and Eon Productions, who made GoldenEye the movie, Hollis and his team were able to create their own sequences and digress from the main narrative of the film so they could make a game make more sense, which is why you have all the cool levels.
That's awesome.
Right? that makes all the levels super cool. Like, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I mean, we have like, I'll go through my favorite levels later. I'll have a lot about this. I got to keep going. Okay. The timeline of development started, it was a 4-person team. Okay, including Hollis. You also had a programmer named Mark Edmonds, a background artist named Carl Hilton, and a character artist named B. Jones. Couldn't find his first name. Very mysterious, B. Jones. Gotta love that guy. But in the following months, they were like, we need more people. So they hired designer Duncan Botwood first, and he joined the team to make levels. Like, that was his whole job. And then the first year was spent just the 5 of them working together, producing like art for the game and making a good engine for the game to run on. And this originally only allowed the players and enemies to move around like a virtual environment. That's what it did. They kind of made it so like, okay, we got a game that works, and now we can make all the bells and whistles happen with it, you know? So everything they made, this is crazy to me, was guessing the power of the N64.
Oh, because they were working on it before
idea.
the N64 was out.
Yeah, there was nothing. There was no dev kit. All they had was an SGI Onyx workstation and Nintendo's custom Ningen development software. So they had the Ningen software, and that's the only thing they had. They actually even used a Sega Saturn controller to test early on. Since they didn't know what the N64 controller would look like, they had to use a Sega Saturn controller.
Not even close.
No, right? After a year, Rare did end up hiring more people. The first was a designer by the name of David Doak. And Doak helped with the level designs and worked on the AI scripting. And here's a really cool fact about stealth in GoldenEye from David Doak. Quote, whenever you fired a gun, it had a radius test and alerted the non-player characters within that radius. If you fired the same gun again within a certain amount of time, it did a larger radius test. And I think there was even a third larger radius test after that. It meant that if you found one guy and shot him in the head and then didn't fire again, the timer would reset.
Oh, so that's how you would do around. Stealth. Yeah, that makes sense.
They really wanted stealth to be a part of. They wanted you to feel like a spy, and one of the ways they did it too is windows in the game were programmed so that you could see through them, but enemies could not, because they wanted the player to spy on enemies and feel like they were sneaking around. You know, which you have to do on the hard levels, like 00 agent levels. You have to be stealthy. Like, it's super hard, because if you get caught and you get attacked by people, you're just gonna die. So, 6 months after Doak was hired, Hollis brought on a programmer named Steve Ellies. I think it's Ellies, Ellies. And he worked on the cheat options menu. I'm talking DK mode. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Paintball mode, all the good stuff. But he is mainly the one responsible for multiplayer. He made multiplayer. And multiplayer was added to the game 6 months before the game came out.
Wow, that's like the biggest part of the game. That's why that game was so influential, was its multiplayer.
Yeah, Doak even has a quote about Ellie saying, Ellie sat in a room with all the code written for a single-player game and turned GoldenEye into a multiplayer game. And
wow.
He just did it. And the team did spend time, like they play tested it a lot before it was finished, and they had like the multiplayers were levels, they really wanted them to be based on the single-player campaign, so if you play the single campaign first, you could be like, oh, now we're kind of revisiting these levels again. And they were like initially not designed to handle like, I mean, it was actually some of them don't support 4 players.
Some of the levels don't? Oh, really?
In the multiplayer mode, like you won't let you click on them because they were just like not designed for multiplayer, and then and it just so you can only play certain ones. My favorite multiplayer level was Facility. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
Which, if you played that in Perfect Dark, it was called Felicity. That's fun. Okay. So, the last hire was an artist named Adrian Smith. And Adrian Smith, his whole job was to make the cool visual effects in the game, like the muzzle flashes and the explosions. And he mentioned that the influence for him was the 1995 film Heat, which is an amazing movie. If you haven't seen Heat, go watch Heat. It's so great.
I haven't seen Heat. I probably should.
Heat's really fun. Heat, has like a bank robbery sequence in a city, and it just becomes this big like shootout, and there's Val Kilmer. It's so good. Gosh, you got a little young, even old Val. I love Val Kilmer of any age. Excuse me. I'm not trying to be ageist to Val Kilmer. We love you. This is a Val Kilmer fan podcast now. Scrap the rest of it. Okay.
You know who should play John Glames in a John Glames movie? Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer. Glames. John Glames. Here's a fun fact. There was also a firing range that was made as an environment in GoldenEye that you could go to, but it was not added to the game. It was just made as a side thing, and they're like, we're not going to put that in, which is fine. But on release, GoldenEye sold 2.1 million copies in 1998, and that beats Zelda Ocarina of Time again. So they sold even more total, and they sold more in the first year it was out, because it came out right kind of around Ocarina of Time. So this game was a huge success critically. Okay, we all know that. It's on like every list of the greatest video game of all time, and we all love multiplayer, and if you picked Odd Job, you're the enemy. That's all I got to say about that. Okay. But personally, we're going to talk about, I figure we could talk about GoldenEye for a little bit, Tyler, if you want to take a little break from the history. But my favorite single player levels of the game are Train and Frigate. Do you remember those? The train one where you use the watch later to open up the trap door underneath to get out and escape, and then Frigate where you got to rescue all the hostages on the boat. In multiplayer, I always played as Jaws because I was a kid and I really liked Jaws the movie, so I figured I should get Jaws the person. And even though I had a huge disadvantage because Jaws is gigantic and has huge hitboxes, I still had fun. Did you play this game a lot?
You know what? So growing up on my Nintendo 64, before I was 13 years old, my mom would not let me get teen-rated games, and so I did not play GoldenEye really at all. I kind of played it a couple times at friends' houses, but I never really got into it the way other people did. So it's not really a game that's on like my repertoire of games that I played on the N64, despite being the third best-selling game on the Nintendo 64, because I definitely had Super Mario. Well, I didn't have Super Mario 64, but I played it a lot. I definitely had Mario Kart. I definitely had Ocarina of Time. GoldenEye, nowhere to be found. Was rated teen, couldn't play it. So I don't really have a whole lot of memories. That would be great.
I think I have a copy of it. I'll bring it over next time in LA. And we'll play it on paintball mode so our moms don't get mad. That's what I did. My mom said I could play it, but I had to be on paintball mode.
Yeah, I tried to use that one with my mom. She held a hard stance, no teen-rated games.
You know what? Good for her. She's a nice lady. You gotta love. I've never met. Have I met your mom? I don't know if I've met your mom before.
I don't think so.
Oh well, she's a nice lady. Everybody.
She's a very nice lady.
Okay, good, excellent. I love GoldenEye. It's amazing, and I've said it a billion times before, but GoldenEye was great. I had Perfect Dark, and it changed my life. And I think that's just the natural progression to the next one. One day, I'll talk about Perfect Dark in more detail, but we got so much more James Bond left. Oh, my goodness. Okay, February 9th, 1998. That's right. We're only at the end of the 90s. That saw the release of James Bond 007, an action-adventure game developed by the Sapphire Corporation and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. So this is a Game Boy only game called James Bond 007. The game is played across 11 levels, and it has gambling in it too, like Baccarat and Blackjack. And the original story of the game, it has an original story. It involves the player looking for a secret weapons cache hidden somewhere in the world, and you run into like all these Bond villains. It's like an all-star greatest hits of Bond villains, like Jaws and Odd Job and all those guys. The game
that's great.
Was released with a score of a 62% on GameRankings.com, so kind of mixed reviews. But for a Game Boy game, it seems like they did a really good job on it, and it was a good game. You know, I just love it when they write original stories.
We're starting to get into that era here. Like from here on out, we get a few movie games, but a lot of them are original stories.
Oh man, and they're gonna be great. One of them really gets me excited. It makes me want to play it, but I'll get to that when I get to that. 1999. We're going to party like that, okay?
Yes.
This is when the world had the first ever 007 third-person shooter. With the game Tomorrow Never Dies for PlayStation. It was released on November 16th, 1999 in the US. The game was originally intended as a continuation of the film, where the story would pick up where the movie left off, but then focus groups said they just wanted to play the scenes from the movie. So focus groups ruined it.
Ah, bummer.
Yeah, so what they went with instead were the most, and this is the most like notable fact of Tomorrow Never Dies. It is the first of 3 games in the James Bond franchise that allows players to control a character other than James Bond himself in the single player story. Because, you know, in multiplayer, you can play as other people.
Right.
And so for a level, you played as Wai Lin, a spy for the Chinese People External Security Force in one level, and a Bond girl. You got to play as a Bond girl, which is cool, I think.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so the problem was the game received mixed to poor reviews. And this is mostly because, and get ready for this, it didn't have a multiplayer mode.
That was why GoldenEye was so successful. Everybody loved playing multiplayer. If you put out a James Bond game without multiplayer, what are you doing?
Oh, and we're going to get to more of that in a second because there was another one. Yeah. So 2000 saw a battle between two platforms. There was a The World Is Not Enough game for both the N64 and PlayStation. Now, the N64 version was developed by Eurocom, while the PlayStation version was developed by Black Ops Entertainment. And you would think Black Ops Entertainment would make a really cool spy game.
Yeah,
but they
you'd
didn't.
think. Oh, so they're like completely different games, even though they're the same.
Yeah, so they follow the same story, and they're both first-person shooters, but the N64 game came out before the PlayStation counterpart and was considered a better game, mostly because, and once again, the PlayStation version did not have a multiplayer mode.
What were they thinking?
And this was taken out by the team because they thought it would make the rest of the game lose quality if they focused on a multiplayer mode and a single player. And wow, they were wrong. Let me tell you what. The N64 version had King of the Hill, Deathmatch, Capture the Flag in 4-player split screen, while the PlayStation version had some really cool motion capture because they spent so much time doing mocap to get like 30 different animations for NPCs, which is cool, but that's not multiplayer, and people want multiplayer.
Yeah.
So,
how did that game... Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. What were you going to ask?
I would say, how did that game's multiplayer compare to like GoldenEye? Because you hear people talk about GoldenEye a lot, but I don't really hear people talk about The World Is Not Enough. And you hear people talk about Perfect Dark.
It's well received, but it's not GoldenEye. It's just
more the same.
Yeah, you can't be GoldenEye. You know what I mean? That's the problem. Also, I think this is kind of around the time that Perfect Dark did come out. So people on N64 were playing Perfect Dark.
Oh, yeah. If you had to make a choice, you didn't actually care about Bond. You cared about the multiplayer, and Perfect Dark had
You went with
the better
Rare.
multiplayer.
Yeah. So the N64 version of The World Is Not Enough came out with an 81 on Metacritic, while the PlayStation version has a 61, which is a pretty big drop-off.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
So the other game to come out, though, on November 20th, 2000 was 007 Racing.
Oh, boy, that sounds fun.
Yeah, it was developed by Technics, I think that's how you say that, and then published by Electronic Arts, and it came out on the PlayStation only. Now, this game marks the 7th appearance of Pierce Brosnan's James Bond, and the game had his likeness, but not his voice. He was voiced by a man named Tim Bentinck.
Too expensive.
Yeah, Bentinck. Oh, Bentinck, I think is how you say it. This is a car game. I'm going to call it that because you don't actually race anybody in the story mode. You just use gadgets with the car to destroy your enemies. There is a story, though, and there is a multiplayer mode where you race a buddy and you use your items against him. So it's kind of got a Twisted Metal James Bond vibe. Oh, that's how I would describe it. The game has a 51 on Metacritic, so it didn't really do well. In fact, the multiple reviews I read, multiple ones said they should rent this game and not buy it, which is a terrible thing to hear in your review. Like, hey, you should get this one for Blockbuster for 3 days and then never play it again. It's like, yikes. There just wasn't a lot there content-wise, I think. And multiplayer got stale because it's just 2-player racing. It's not... I bet you some people loved it, and I am sure critics don't know, they don't describe everything about a game, but... wasn't very well received. So, 2001 saw the release of the Game Boy Color version of The World Is Not Enough. This version is a game that was torn apart by critics. I don't really know why, but the game was released on September 11th, 2001. So maybe that's why.
Well, it's not like they could predict anything bad happening on that day.
Maybe. It was just like, what a horrible release date. I just wanted to include that one in there because it had literally the worst release date of all time.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it is. So now the other game in 2001, though, is really exciting. And that's James Bond 007 Agent Under Fire.
Oh,
this
nice.
came out first on the PlayStation in November 13th, 2001, but then it later came to GameCube and Xbox too. It was on all three. That's what's cool about it. But what's even more cool about this game is it's the 4th 007 game with an original story, but the first not to have any actor's likeness.
Oh, it's not Pierce Brosnan?
Nope. It's Agent Under Fire. They used the voice of an actor named Adam Blackwood and the likeness of English actor Andrew Bicknell for James Bond. Bicknell,
wow,
not Bicknell.
I did not know that.
Yeah, the game is a first-person shooter with 15 different guns. The story is a very Bond story, underwater bases, Swiss Alps, etc. Okay, but this is one of the things in the game that was funny, I thought. There's a verification code that's optional for you to get in one mission, and if you get the verification code, if you don't get it, you get captured and taken to the brig of the submarine, but if you get it, you get to have a sexual encounter in the submarine with the Bond girl.
Oh, wow.
Which is like, oh, they did a little gross choose your own adventure in this version of the game. But I mean, that's very Bond, I guess.
Yeah.
The multiplayer mode in Agent Under Fire is 4 players. And the cool thing is, multiplayer games can also be played with one player against an AI player, much like my personal favorite N64 first-person shooter, Perfect Dark.
Oh, yeah.
The highest score on Metacritic actually was the GameCube version of the game. It got a 74, and then the other two got 72 and 71. They, although we're so close, they're not really that different.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. I think the interesting thing about Agent Under Fire that is unrelated to it being a James Bond game is the Xbox version had exploits available, or the exploits that were in it that allowed you to mod your Xbox. So if you got a hacked save game file and got it uploaded to your Xbox, Agent Under Fire was one of the games that you could mod your Xbox with.
Oh, like a soft mod kind of thing where you don't have to tear anything apart?
Yep, there's Agent Under Fire. I think Mech Assault had one, and then Splinter Cell, the original Splinter Cell.
Oh, did that permanently change your Xbox after you did it though, right?
Yeah, if you
just use the disc once and then it's done. Isn't
yeah, so you could rent the game and then load the save file, and then your Xbox was modded, and then you could get rid of the game. It also had to be the non-Platinum Hits version of the game because they fixed the bug on the Platinum Hits version.
Ah, cool fact from Tyler, everybody.
Yeah, which was not the case with Splinter Cell. You can use the Platinum Hits version of Splinter Cell and still mod your Xbox. That's why it's the best one for modding your Xbox. Tyler's Xbox modding corner is over now.
That was really good. I really like Tyler's Xbox modding corner. It's one of my favorite places to be. Now, this is probably my favorite James Bond game after GoldenEye.
Ooh,
big deal.
Very excited.
November 18th, 2002, we got James Bond 007 Nightfire.
Oh, yes. This is my favorite one, too. Because I didn't play
so
GoldenEye,
good.
it's actually my favorite just in general because I had this game because I was 13 when it came out, and I was able to pick up a copy.
It was also the most James Bond GoldenEye light game.
Yeah, it was fantastic. This game was just...
What's cool about this game, by the way, is it is technically a sequel to Agent Under Fire. Okay? I couldn't find in plot descriptions any references to Agent Under Fire, though, to Nightfire. But Nightfire was published by EA in 2002. If you didn't know, they're publishing Bond games now. Okay? EA does Bond games in these years. I'll tell you when they stop. Okay? Nightfire was developed by Eurocom for the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox game consoles, while Gearbox Software, little Borderlands nod, made the Windows version of the game using the Gold Circ engine.
That's
don't know
the
what
Half-Life,
that is.
the original Half-Life engine. Gold Source.
Oh, Gold Source. Okay, and then Asper re-released the game for Mac OS. They're the ones that developed the Mac version. The PC versions of the game, it's important to note, are extremely different than the console versions, and we will be talking about the console versions because I played the game on PS2, and this is my podcast, so we're going to switch over. Well,
the PC version is also garbage, just a hot pile of garbage. It's terrible.
And I was like, you know what? I feel like Tyler's fine with me making that executive decision, and that's how it worked. Okay, so this time they actually did use Pierce Brosnan's likeness, though. But the character was voiced by Maxwell Caulfield, and they actually digitally scanned Brosnan's face to get the look right in this game. They actually did a digital scan of his face. Very high tech. Once again, it's a first-person shooter, but this one had the most GoldenEye feel of it to me. The single player is super fun, but the multiplayer is where it was at.
Oh, yeah.
That's mostly because you could play as all of these old, unlockable James Bond villain characters. Okay, so here, I'm going to name them off right now, the ones you can play as. You ready?
Yes.
Jaws, Baron Samedi, Oddjob, Max Zorin, Mayday, Francisco Scaramanga, Xenia Onatop, Christmas Jones, Auric Goldfinger, Wei Lin, Pussy Galore, and so many others.
Wow, so
but those
exciting.
are the famous ones that I recognize, so I included those. Again, making executive decisions here for the thing. But there were a ton of levels, though, too. My personal favorite was a multiplayer level called Skyrail, where you were on a ski slope. Yeah, and you would fight on gondolas and stuff. And The guns like played really well too. It kind of reminds me of like how we play Destiny so much because the shooter aspect of it just feels good. This game just felt good when you played it. It just felt right. They really got it down. And go ahead.
I say I love the guided missile where you could like control the missile that you fly around.
Oh, it's awesome. So cool, so fun. And yeah, all these cool gadgets and stuff too. The game had been in development as early as September 2000. And the game's working title was called James Bond in ... Phoenix Rising. Isn't that a cool name?
That is a very cool name.
But then in May 2002, they revealed that it was going to be called 007 Nightfire. A little easier to say, not too long.
That's a great name too, though.
Nightfire is a great name. There are driving sequences in the single-player version of the game, and they were developed by Savage Entertainment and a team at Electronic Arts. And both Agent Under Fire and Nightfire both had driving levels in the single-player story, and any chance to drive a Bond car is cool. And it actually the driving felt really good in the game too. I should mention that.
There are no driving parts in the PC version. That's part of why it sucks so much. All the driving parts are just gone. They're just not in it.
And the driving parts were cool because you had these gadgets in your car. You could do cool stuff.
Yeah.
Nightfire also marked the first time a James Bond video game featured its own original song. It's called Nearly Civilized, performed by Esthero.
Man, I can't think of that right now. I'm going to have to listen to it. I'm sure it'll ring a bell once I load it up.
It also had an original score composed by Steve Duckworth and Ed Lima and Jeff Timashuk. I don't know who they are, but I figured I'd give them a little credit because I talked about the original song. So there it goes. Nightfire was positive reviewed on all consoles. It had between an 80 and 81 on Metacritic. And like I said before, the PC games, not very good. But I love this game. I love this game so much. I still think about it. My brother and I played it so much. It was so fun.
Yep. It's always worth going back to, too. I think it holds up okay.
It totally does. PlayStation 2 games in general really hold up. I really like them. Also, as a kid, I remember this game looking really pretty. And I'm sure if I looked at it now, it would look disgusting. But that's fine. That's how it always is. February 17th, 2004 was the year James Bond 007 Everything or Nothing came out on consoles. There was a Game Boy Advance version of the game that came out actually before the console version in 2003. What's interesting about this is we're going back to the old third-person shooter thing again. Okay? And that hadn't happened since Tomorrow Never Dies for PlayStation. But the cool thing in this game is it was voice acted a lot by the actors in the movie. So that had Pierce Brosnan, Willem Dafoe, John Cleese, and Judi Dench.
Wow, big budget for this game.
Yeah, and Everything or Nothing. And it's an original story again. It was written by a guy named Bruce Firestein, who you will see a lot in this. He writes pretty much all the rest of the games, pretty much, for the original games anyway. It was also written by Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, but Bruce Firestein, is it Fairstein? It might be Fairstein, Feirstein. He writes all these original James Bond things. It's really cool. Everything or Nothing, it actually revolves around Bond having to deal with nanotechnology being used for terrorism. So it's actually kind of a cool thing. I want to play this game. It also had an original theme song performed by Maya. Yeah, remember Maya? And she was also a Bond girl in the game. That's really cool. The game is a mix of third-person action and driving sequences, and the cool part of it is the third person used the Agent Under Fire engine, but the driving was from the Need for Speed engine, so it felt really cool. Good. Yeah, Need for Speed, great games. They don't make them anymore, I don't think, though.
They're making a new one now, actually.
Ooh, I love it. Because it's
a
kind
reboot.
Ooh, I love that. I'm into that. This was the first 007 game also to have multiplayer in the form of split-screen co-op. You could play the single player as co-op. So that's exciting.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and it's also this next one. This one sold well. It had positive reviews, and it had an 84 on Metacritic. So it's a great game. Everything or Nothing. This is kind of the golden age of their create your own story games. And the next one didn't fare as well, but this is the one I want to play the most. And this game is called GoldenEye Rogue Agent. And it was released on November 22nd, 2004. And I want to play this because you don't play as James Bond.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
You play as an ex-MI6 agent working for Auric Goldfinger, and you got to try to assassinate Dr. No. It's all bad guy fights. It's kind of like the Star Wars Force Unleashed of the James Bond universe.
That's exactly what I want.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Your name is GoldenEye. That's the name of your code name of your rogue agent. and you were in MI6, you lost your eye in a fight with Dr. No, you became obsessed with vengeance, and now you got a gold cybernetic eye, and you want to kill Dr. No, and you're teaming up with Auric Goldfinger to do that. And I love that. I just love that you don't play as James Bond. It gets me so excited because I think that's the only thing I want to play in the universe. I don't want to play James Bond all the time necessarily. So the game is first-person shooter. It has 8 levels total, but you have gadgets in your golden eye. So your eye it has MRI vision. You know, you can see through walls. You could EM hack things. It had a polarity shield, which deflected incoming bullets. Totally realistic. And then a magnetic field, which allowed you to send enemies like flying to their deaths across the map. Really powerful eye stuff. And each ability is granted to the player like as the game goes along, and it requires like energy, and then you run out of energy and it slowly goes up. So you can only use it's like kind of strategy when to use your cool gold eye. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The multiplayer mode was cool too because it was super customizable and it had online and LAN support up to 8 players.
Nice.
So you could play split screen like you normally do, but you could also play it online or as a LAN, and it had a very Call of Duty-esque system of unlocking stuff. So during the story mode, you unlocked octopus tokens, which you could use to like get new skins or characters or like maps or guns and stuff like that. So again, you can unlock like Oddjob or Dr. No or Xenia on a top, and there were all these maps you can unlock like Pump Room, the Bathhouse, all this stuff, okay? The cool thing too is I think they also had some crossover with other like GoldenEye movies, so you could unlock cool stuff. The game was a commercial success. It sold 1 million units worldwide, but Metacritic has the score as 58 to 61, which is kind of average to mediocre. Which is kind of a bummer to me personally, because I wanted this game to be amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it seems amazing. Okay, the next one is interesting because it's an old Bond movie. Yeah, this is James Bond 007 From Russia with Love.
Oh, I remember that. I didn't play it, but I remember it coming out.
It's Sean Connery. So it came out on November 1st, 2005 for consoles, and Sean Connery actually came back to provide his voice and likeness to the game because they adapted the movie and the novel into a game together. It was not just straight up the movie.
Oh, nice.
You play as Sean Connery's Bond, and you got to defeat Octopus, which in the movies is Spectre, but they didn't use that for legal reasons. So it's called Octopus, like they do, you know? This is also the last James Bond movie game published by EA. They will lose the rights after this to Activision. So important to note that. You got it? You note it down? You put it in your notes, Tyler?
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Excellent. The game got mixed reviews from critics, between a 69 and 73% on Metacritic. Maxim magazine reviewed the game, and it said this: it's also sometimes pedestrian, with a host of uninspired levels and dim bad guys ruining what could have been the triumphant return of 007. And then I'm like, oh yeah, Maxim would review a 007 game because they're like a men's magazine and everyone's like, 007 is like such a dude or whatever. I don't know. It seems silly to me. The next Bond game wouldn't come out until November 4th, 2008. That's right. You got kind of like a 3-year lull here.
No Casino Royale game, huh?
No Casino Royale game. And that was called 007 Quantum of Solace. And this is the first title published by Activision, which is why there was a big break in between.
Oh,
and
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's straight up based on the movie. And the game was released by on Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3, Wii, and Xbox 360, and it was developed by Treyarch.
Oh.
So Call of Duty, folks, you know what I mean? It's a first-person shooter, and it was very notable because of its multiplayer on everything except for PlayStation for PlayStation 2, because they had a PlayStation 2 version of the game.
Oh, but in that era, the PlayStation 2 version was always the crappy. Did the Wii have multiplayer too? Usually the Wii and the PlayStation 2 version were the same.
The Wii did have multiplayer, and it definitely was different. And so the Wii and the PlayStation 2 versions are kind of looked down upon as not being the real versions of the game, but they were just different. So you actually had like cool multiplayer modes that would come back in other games. So they had this one called Bond Versus, where one Bond is Bond, and you got to like defuse 3 bombs, and then there's like other members of the organization, so like Spectre or Octopus or whatever, and you got to like defeat Bond. He's got 2 lives. It's kind of this cool thing. They had Team Deathmatch. They had Golden Gun, which is free for all, but you want to get 100 points, because once you scored 100 points with normal weapons, you got the Golden Gun, and Golden Gun kills were 1-hit kills, which is cool. There was a mode called Bond Evasion, where there are 2 teams, MI6 and the organization, and you got VIPs. on the MI6 version, and if the VIP escapes, which is Bond because he's on MI6, then you win. And if he gets killed by the organization, the organization wins. So that's how it works. Territory control, which is your basic like control domination mode if you play
King
Call
of
of
the
Duty.
Hill.
Yeah. Classic is where you start with the Glock 18 and then the weapons and explosives like spawn on the map, kind of like the older versions of the games, which I thought was cool. They included that in there.
Nice.
The cool part about this game, though, is it had a multiplayer system that was really upgradable. Like it was like you got credits and you could use the credits to unlock like upgrades for your guns and upgrades for bombs, for like explosives and gadgets. And you could also increase your health and stuff too. You could make yourself better too. And it just seemed like a really deep multiplayer mode, which I thought was really neat for a James Bond game. And it got mixed reviews, though. So the Wii version got 54, and the PlayStation 2 version, the one that I said was weird, actually got a 76. It got the highest.
Really?
Yeah, because the PlayStation 2 version was actually a third-person one, top-down from the shoulder. It wasn't first-person.
Oh, it was a completely different game.
Which is really interesting. But I reviewed the Xbox, PC, and PS3 one on here because that's the one that most people played.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that came out on 3 different consoles. So if you're upset and you played the PS2 version, send us an email, codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Okay. November 2nd, 2010, saw something very exciting. This was the remake of N64's GoldenEye 007. It was made for the Wii by Eurocom. Notice no Rare there, because Rare at this time was owned by Microsoft. And that's how this whole thing started. So Reggie Fils-Aimé, our hero, wanted to bring the original GoldenEye 007 64 back to the virtual console. Didn't even want to remake it. He just wanted to bring it back to the virtual console for the Wii store, okay? But there were so many legal hoops because Rare was owned by Microsoft. Activision at the time had the 007 rights. So once they worked it all out, they all decided they should just remake the game. Now, some important notes about the remake. Daniel Craig replaces Pierce Brosnan in the remake. And this is like, I was kind of like bummed out. I'm like, oh man, that's weird. But then I learned that Daniel Craig is actually a huge gamer. So
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either. So Michael G. Wilson, this is a quote. He's the producer of the James Bond film in 2010. So that would be Casino Royale, I believe, right? 2010? Yep. And no, this is after Quantum of Solace. So it would be a different one. He said, quote, when we first pitched the game to him, he was really excited about it. He thought the original game was great. Daniel plays a lot of games and gives us a lot of good criticism. We'll show him what the plan is and he'll suggest changes and get very hands-on. So he even wanted to be like involved in the game-making process. So just when I thought I couldn't love Daniel Craig anymore, he just likes video games.
Wow, that's incredible.
What a cool guy. The plot was a reimagined version of GoldenEye, written once again by Bruce. I'm going to call him Fairstein. That sounds right to me because it's F-E-I-R. Does that work for you? I hope he doesn't get insulted. If he calls us, oh man, I'm going to be so upset. Also, how did he get my phone number? That's crazy. They changed a lot of things up to make it match the plot more for the game than the movie. Okay, so they did a lot of alterations to the plot to kind of make it fit better. But I know you all want to talk about the multiplayer, so here we go. GoldenEye 007 features both offline split screen for up to 4 local players and then online play for 8 players, so 4 on 4. There are 10 multiplayer maps. There are 4 different game modes for offline players and 9 different game modes for online players. So if you were playing online, you got it, buddy. You're all in it, okay? And you can actually play online with Nintendo Wi-Fi connection at the time. And though up to 8 players can connect to a game remotely, 1 local player is allowed at a time. So you have to have
screen if you're playing online.
Yeah, no split screen. Multiplayer had characters from the single player campaign, such as, James Bond, Trevelyan, and then also it had all those guys, Jaws, Odd Jobs, all those people back again, which is good. There was additionally an online XP system when you played multiplayer online that helped you unlock stuff. That did not happen locally. The game was positively reviewed. It had an 81 on Metacritic. Now, there was another version of this game called called GoldenEye 007 Reloaded. And that's the one that came out on PlayStation and Xbox.
Oh.
And that had good reviews as well. But what's weird is the PlayStation version was just removed from the store. And no one knows why.
Strange.
So if you wanted to get the game on PlayStation, you're out of luck. I'm so sorry. Okay. So GoldenEye came out, and right when that came out, there was another original James Bond game that was released. 2 James Bond games were released at the same time, around the same time. James Bond 007 Bloodstone came out November 2nd, 2010 in North America for Windows, DS, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. Now, this was a third-person shooter.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about these. I don't know how I feel about third-person shooters with this.
Yeah.
But it had cool hand-to-hand combat and then driving sequences. That's important. The player piloted several different vehicles throughout the course of the game, and there was a new focus feature that had you could cool melee touch takedowns. So James Bond's doing some more fighting and just shooting, which I guess is kind of cool. Once again, Bruce Fairstein writing another original story. This guy's a writing machine for the James Bond universe. And the game itself is built on the developer Bizarre Creations' Bespoke engine, which was created for the original game The Club. Did you ever play The Club?
I did not play The Club.
The Club, if I remember correctly, is kind of like a Fast and Furious kind of game. Do you want to Google
sense.
The Club for me?
Yeah.
That's going off my memory, and I don't trust it.
They also did, I think, the Project Gotham games, right?
Yeah, The Club feels like it's supposed to be kind of like Midnight Club. Those games, remember those? I love those games.
Yeah, okay. The Club, it looks like a third-person shooter is what it is.
Oh, well, I got it way wrong. I just felt like it was like a cool crime. Maybe kind of like Fast and Furious. I don't know. But Ben Cook, this is what's interesting. He's a stunt coordinator. He was the stunt double for Daniel Craig in the movies. And he was the one to do the motion capture and the choreography for the whole game. And he is the game's stunt coordinator. He's credited in the credits with that.
Nice.
I didn't even know games had stunt coordinators. I think that's pretty cool.
I guess they got to. If you're doing motion capture for animations, you probably need a stunt coordinator.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this game's also cool because it has another original soundtrack and another original Bond song. So the soundtrack was composed by Richard Jacques, but Joss Stone. Remember Joss Stone?
Mm-hmm.
Like a soul singer? Watch her videos on MTV2. She had the musical track I'll Take It All, which was the track of the game, and it was written and performed by her and David A. Stewart. There's a multiplayer mode for this game. It has up to 16 players. That's cool, right?
Oh, man.
Spies. You play Spies versus Mercenaries. They also have Team Deathmatch and other your normal game modes. There's some pretty big objective-based game modes, which I think is cool, very different for the other James Bond games at the time. You got to defend different points. You got to play the objective. That's what you got to do.
Definitely.
There was a DS version of the game, and what's cool about the DS version of the game, it's actually rated higher than the console version.
That's never a good sign.
No, so the DS version's got a 70 on Metacritic, and the other ones are in the 60s for each console. I thought that was interesting. Now, we have made our way to the last James Bond game. I hope I didn't go too fast. There's just a lot to cover in this one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, 2012 was the 50th anniversary of the James Bond franchise. So, to celebrate, Activision decided they were going to release a first-person shooter called 007 Legends on October 16th, 2012 for the Xbox 360 and PS3. To me, this is a great idea, what they had proposed. They just couldn't get the execution right, I think is
That's
how
too
I
bad.
describe it. Yeah, so the single-player version is a celebration of all of the actors from the movie. I got really excited when I read this. There are 6 missions, each based on 6 actor eras. So the first was Goldfinger, where you play as Sean Connery. Then On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where you play as George Lazenby. Then Moonraker for Roger Moore. License to Kill for Timothy Dalton. Die Another Day for Pierce Brosnan. And Skyfall with Daniel Craig.
Nice.
Notice that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 6 actors said there. Okay, there's 6 of them. When the game came out, there was only 5. Because Daniel Craig in Skyfall was DLC. If you wanted to finish the story of the game, you had to download the DLC.
Wow.
And I think that's because the movie hadn't come out yet. And they were kind of like, we don't want to spoil a movie in a game. So they had to hold off. Now, what's cool is these are 6 missions, not 6 levels. Each mission had levels inside of it. And every single one of the missions had a vehicle level guaranteed inside of it. So, and they had an overarching narrative stringing the whole thing together. Because I don't want to ruin the plot of Skyfall, But Skyfall is a lot about Bond's past. That's the most vague way I can say it.
Yeah,
And
I actually haven't seen that movie. I haven't seen any of the Daniel Craig movies other than Casino Royale. I've been meaning to get around to that, so thank you for reminding me.
dude, Skyfall is actually really good. I really enjoyed Skyfall a lot. And I think it makes total sense why they did this, which is why I got so excited when I read about this. But it was just like, it didn't do well. It was the fourth and final James Bond game released by Activision. It had the same engine as GoldenEye Reloaded because it was made by Eurocom, developed it. And the game is way more stealth focused. You can run and gun if you want to, but there's 3 gadgets that help you stealth. There's a smartphone, a dart pen, and a wristwatch with a laser, because you got to have a laser. Okay, they all have other features too in them. And the cool addition too is you have an XP system again where you can progress, and you can use the XP to make your gadgets better, your weapons better, or Bond's physical abilities to get better as you play the single player game. The composers from the old release in the series, GoldenEye 007, are there. They came back to do the music for 007 Legends, which is awesome. So that's Kevin Kiner. He worked on and wrote and composed the soundtrack. David Arnold wrote his own instrumental arrangement of Goldfinger, the original Goldfinger song for the main title sequence for the game.
Goldfinger. He's the man. Man with the Midas touch. That's me. That's my singing.
It's good. Gosh, I thought I was in Goldfinger when you were singing that. I thought I was right there.
Midas touch. Right. That's all I know. The song.
We're going to release an episode next week, and it's just going to be Tyler singing that song for 3 minutes, and that's going to be the episode. Multiplayer had 4-player split screen online, which is good. You got to have split screen online offline. I mean, in a James Bond game, and then if you had online, you could play up to 12 people, so 6 on 6. Okay,
nice.
The multiplayer's experience was indicated by their players' level. It felt so. This was one of the biggest critiques of the game. It felt very Call of Duty-y. They had a prestige system where you started at grade 0, and then you got to 00 to reset it to like the prestige, and you would unlock character skins from single player. And then you can get gadgets and all sorts of stuff unlocked as you progress in the multiplayer mode. And that's why it wasn't really met with positive reviews. Like, a lot of places were like, this isn't a Bond game. This is a Call of Duty clone.
Oh.
And it was kind of a bummer because it seems really cool. Like, they had so many game modes that Conflict, Golden Gun, You Only Live Twice, Escalation, Data Miner, Team Conflict, Icarus, and Black Box. Like, they're named after the movies, some of them. It's just really cool. And it got 40s on Metacritic, and the PC version got a 26. Yeah, it's really bad. But so that's it. I hope that they figure it out and we get a new James Bond video game in the same vein of GoldenEye or Nightfire. But personally, what I would want is another really solid Nightfire rogue agent style of original storytelling.
Yeah.
You know? And also, in my opinion, Bond should be a first-person shooter. But it shouldn't be like COD, or it should be its own thing. You know? It's okay for it to feel like GoldenEye if it's updated graphics, and you don't have to aim down sights necessarily. You're Bond, you're ridiculous. But I want it to feel that way again. I remember that From Russia with Love game coming out and me thinking it would really be good. And then I read stuff about it and I was like, oh no, like they just can't get it down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is, if you wanted to pick up any James Bond game, I've read today, get the remake of GoldenEye or get Nightfire. Those are my 2 recommendations. Or get original GoldenEye if you have that on a 64.
I can agree with that. I would also, if you're not necessarily set on James Bond, but you still want that style of game, I'd say pick up Perfect Dark, because it is GoldenEye but better. It's just not with a James Bond skin. Perfect
Dark is my favorite game. Perfect Dark is so good. It was my favorite game on N64. I loved it so much. I played it nonstop. I had it's so high rated. I loved it so much.
And the Xbox 360 version is fantastic and backward compatible with Xbox One, so no reason not to play.
Yeah, get on it right now. Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, yesterday I picked up Link's Awakening on Switch, the remake. And I played the first 3 dungeons, and it is fantastic. I remember playing the game, 20-some years ago on Game Boy, and I had a blast. I loved it then. It was one of the first games I ever beat on my own. And I recently replayed Link's Awakening probably like 6 or 7 years ago, so not that recent. But it's all coming back to me, and it's just so fun. I love the art style. It's like got this really plasticky, like toy art style that makes it, like you can practically smell it when you're playing, like that plasticky smell.
I love it.
It's really, really cool. Just the way the light reflects off of things, you can tell that it's sort of dreamlike, and so I've been having a lot of fun with that. Otherwise, I really haven't been playing anything else besides Final Fantasy XIV, and I played a little bit of Destiny with you the other day. That was pretty fun.
Watch me get mad at comp. It's fun.
Yeah, and then we just gotta quit. But yeah, other than that, I haven't really been playing much else. It's mostly just Link's Awakening at this point.
Nice. I've been playing Destiny 2. I've been on that comp grind. I unlocked a gun finally. Not the Recluse for getting really far in it, but like a milestone gun. So I got that. That's cool. And then I've been playing 7 Days to Die with my brother. And that's kind of it. I haven't been playing a lot of new games. I was on the road. I only brought my laptop with me. So I was like, I'm just going to play Destiny if I want to play something. Because it gets my video game itch in. You know? It helps me out. But I haven't really been playing much. But Tyler, I have an important email we received.
Oh boy, I'm excited. I don't know about this email.
This is from Rick. Rick, I told Rick I wouldn't say his last name. I'm trying really hard, but Rick's our buddy. I love Rick so much. He says, Mike, Tyler, joking, you guys rock. I have an hour commute every day to work and then back from work, and I have been binging your eps since I found the podcast. Love the buddy comedy chemistry, and your collective love and knowledge for gaming and its origins is obvious. Also, I rarely laugh out loud when no one is around, but I loll a lot when I'm listening. Super informative, super entertaining. Jayberg is greater than Qbert. And he has messages
true
for us individually. You ready? Tyler, play Final Fantasy IX. Play the heck out of it, is what he says. And he says, Mike, keep Tyler in line. He scares me with his rants and tangents. and wild tangents, I should say. He said, you guys do rock. Looking forward to hearing your cast every week. Peace, Rick. Thank you, Rick. That was such a nice email. And we went back and forth. We've been chatting on the emails. It's nice. I have a friend. It's good. It's good stuff. Thank you, Rick. I'll keep Tyler in line. You know, he's kind of a wild card, kind of the maverick of the podcast, I would say. That's how I describe you.
Wow. Thanks, Mike, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you know, crazy. I mean, you're no John Glames.
Yeah, not quite on the level of John Glames yet.
Yeah, but I should get you. I mean, we should seriously. I encourage everyone to Google John Glames. Okay, he's blonde. He wears a trench coat, and he's apparently James Bond.
Wow.
John Glames. Yeah, it looks so great. He's like opening up his white tuxedo in the cover of Operation Stealth. It's really cool. Everyone should play that. Okay, that was our email. Thank you, Rick. You can always email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can also use the link on our Libsyn page to email us. That's another way you can contact us, actually. And you could rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. We got some new ratings. We are up to 36 now.
Ooh.
That's cool. Big numbers. I feel alive. Thank you so much for doing that. If you rate and review us, it really helps us a lot. You don't have to. You can just also just tell your friends, too. That would be really nice. You don't have to do any of those things either. You can just listen to it. That's also fine. We don't mind. I just want to remind everyone.
Yeah.
You can
or
do
don't
that.
Listen. That's fine, too. If you don't want to, then
if you don't want to. If you're like, man, another episode came out today and I don't want to listen, that's okay. That happens. You know, maybe you'll come back to it later. You know, when we're on episode 7,000.
Hopefully. I can't wait.
To 70. And we're just in our futuristic virtual reality suits, floating in goo, you know? That also is food, because that's how we're going to live.
Yep, that's the future. I've seen the future, and it is goo, floaty, anti-gravity suits.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good stuff. But
all the Jaybird and John Glames you can handle.
Oh, man, I'm going to legally change my name to John Glames. Is that okay with everybody?
I'm super on board with this.
Get John Glames tattoos? Oh, that'd be great. You could tweet us at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. You can get Tyler at Sneaker Elf. Sneaker, SNEAKERELPH. Elf with PH. And that's the episode today. Kind of a longer one, but I wanted to get deep dive into something. And I got all up in James Bond. I know so much about it.
Wow, you are a James Bond video game expert now. And you've inspired me again to go back and watch some movies that I missed. Yeah,
Skyfall is great.
Very excited.
Skyfall's really great. I also I want to go check out these. Like, I really want to check out James Bond Jr.
James Bond Jr.
Looks really cool. And I also want to play Rogue Agent.
Yeah.
Even though Rogue Agent didn't get really praised by critics, I still think the story it sounds like it's worth playing. I want to try it out.
Yeah. I want to play the GoldenEye remake too.
Oh, yeah, that'll be really fun. So many games. So many games to play.
Mm-hmm.
Life, it's got so many games. It doesn't have the problem with that PlayStation did, early on.
Yeah.
So that's great. But Tyler, we did it. Do we know what we're going to talk about next week or no? Or is it a secret?
I think it's a secret, but it might be Sonic Part 2. Because we got some Sonic games to go through still, so.
I like that. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, Tyler.
Goodbye, Mike.